Azene my
Good evening and welcome again to this special live broadcast on Champions Network TV. I am your host, Mija, and tonight we bring you a conversation that matters deeply, not just for scientists, politicians, but for everyone who calls this planet Earth home. Our theme tonight is Climate at a Crossroads, and it is voices from the front line of change. From the dry fields of Binga to the flooded street of Jakarta, climate change is no longer a distant forecast. It's daily reality, but it's also a moment of opportunity to act, to adapt, and to rise together. Tonight, we are joined by distinguished panelists. We have got Dr. Matiza, who is an expert in climate change and environment, all the way from Zimbabwe, but at the moment he's in South Africa. We have got Shumba, geopolitical analyst, Soko, a public speaker and advocate, Jenna, a farmer and an educationist, Umbama Kombe, seasoned business person, and I am your host, Jack of all trades, Mija. So to begin this dialogue, I would like to invite Dr. Matiza to take the stage so that he can help us to start this important discussion.
Thank you, Mijam. Thank you, my fellow panelists. We would want to make this topic a subject of discussion by all of us here, because it's something that affects all of us again on planet Earth. We are going to dwell much on a number of areas that includes understanding what climate change is as a phenomenon. We would also want to look at what causes climate change, which I will shorten for CC. And when we look at the causes of climate change, we also want to look at how these changes now affect the planet Earth, which is home or habitant to us all. And we'll bring in a very important question to say, do you think environmentally the world could have been a better place without human beings? And if the answer is yes or no, so are we saying climate change is entirely a human-made problem? We will also look at what we may need to do as people to reduce the negative effects of climate change, and whether we have replacements for the same resources that we so much use to a point of affecting the climate patterns. And lastly, to say, like Shumba said, lastly to say, does it really exist, or one or two nations or people could really be taking advantage of that to further certain agendas? So that's the entire scope of our discussion here. And to dive straight into the aspect of climate change, we need to know basically what is it that we call climate change. That's the first question that I will pose for discussion. I don't want to kind of provide answers here. I want us to discuss, to say, what is climate change? How do you understand it from your angle, coming from the left? How do you understand it from your angle, coming from the right? Your angle coming from the top, or from your angle coming from the bottom?
So the question is to the House: what is climate change?
Okay, I think I can say, I'll just say one or two things, not much anyway. Firstly, I want to talk about the creation of the world. To say, when God created the world or the earth, He put everything on it, and at that moment there was a balance of everything. So, which means that's what we can refer to as the standard, or the climate that should have been kept. So when we're talking about the climate change, we are now talking about the deviation from that benchmark or the standard from the original creation. Hence, we can now talk about what is then bringing that those changes, and then to see whether the changes are going to be of positive impact or negative impact, so that we can go on further on to say how can we try to maintain the originality. I think I can stop there for now.
Yeah, great. There's an element of change there that Jenna has spoken about, to say it's about creation. It's a state of equilibrium created by God and a certain standard that was there. And when that standard is changing in terms of climate, we are then saying we are talking of climate change. More contributions?
So we are talking of long-term shifts in temperatures and weather patterns, correct?
Yeah, Umba is talking about weather and the patterns that then change, but this should involve a long term or a long time frame. Shumba is muted.
Yeah, I think I don't dispute the science of climate change. I think it's real. Yeah, it's I think the approach in trying to address how do we address climate change, because I think as the world warms up, there's going to be effects all around the world, and in some parts of the world it's actually being felt. I think even you see it through desertification, and then you've got some countries, tropical countries like the islands, I think the Maldives. You can actually see the rising seawater levels. and the glaciers, the melting glaciers. I think the human impact on Mother Earth is real. But for me, I think where I diverge from the whole argument is, I always say Mother Earth has got a way of correcting itself or putting itself into balance. And whether it will mean wiping out some of us for it to get into that balance, Mother Nature will do that. So I think that's where I sort of diverge from the traditional view of how we can mitigate climate change.
Yeah.
I remember there was a teacher who taught me many years ago. He told me that, if I remember this correctly, he said, weather is the state of atmosphere at a particular place at any one moment.
Mm-hmm.
The same teacher again, in another topic, he went on to say, climate is an average type of weather, usually calculated over 100 years or more. Were they wrong?
No, they were not wrong. I'm one of the teachers who used to say that to my students as well. To say, of course, there's no way we can discuss climate without touching on weather, because the two variables are interconnected. While weather looks at, if we look outside tonight, outside the window, if we see frost, or if we see cloud cover, or if we see the sun, we are then talking about weather, and that should be within a short period of time. But certain weather patterns repeated over a long time then speaks to climate. So so climate comes from weather, and weather makes up climate. And it is this climate that is then changing because of possibly how we are interacting with it as human beings. I respect the view which Shumba has brought up to say Mother Earth can always replenish itself. Therefore, the general agreement among scientists seems to say it's human action which has caused so much changes in climate. And as long as we have this factor, the human factor available, we may not be able to give Mother Earth time to replenish herself.
This may take time, isn't it?
Yes, if it's gonna come positive at all, because the rate at which human beings interfere with Mother Earth's efforts to replenish herself, the rate itself is so alarming, and it needs to be in a way controlled. That's possibly where we are coming from, is what can we do to stop the changes that are happening in climate or to Mother Earth.
I think it can only replenish itself.
We can't even hear you, Soko.
Why?
I don't know. Put your hand off your mic.
I don't have my hands on here. I'm not on the mic.
I already say Soko maybe.
Pizza volume then.
Yeah, I can hear you now. That's better. You've taken your
I think Mother Earth can replenish herself if left untouched. Because if you look at the forests, like the tropical rainforest, like the Amazon, there is no problem in the forest. It's still surviving.
No, there is. No.
I mean, it replenishes itself.
Okay.
But we what stops it replenishing itself is because we are interfering with it, isn't it? And I might be wrong. But what the emittances into the atmosphere and the usage of resources like trees, like deforestation. I got it. Deforestation. I did it.
Station, yeah.
And things like that. Because when you look at like when you cut down trees are very important, aren't they? When you cut them down and not put back more trees, it causes more carbon dioxide. And this is what affects. But if you go to the Amazon, things are being affected, but not at the rate that we are seeing this side here. Because the forest, if left undisturbed, the cycle repeats itself like this. But because we are disturbing it and we are releasing too much and we are chucking plastics into the sea, and but is it inevitable? Because the more people we have on earth, the more we waste, we use, and we release waste. And again, isn't it development brings its own side effects? Things like my software at Notion Design. It's very good to have AI. It's very good to do that, but people are losing jobs, isn't it? The more we develop, the more side effects.
Behavior is learned, and it can also be unlearned. That's what one of my teachers told me again.
I think Soko's perspective is looking at the ozone layer, that blanket that is covering Earth. Although you're saying if you look at the forest they're talking about, but around that region, you might say, but the problem that we now have is that that blanket is covering the whole Earth. So controlling the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is difficult to do at one particular point, because it is always moving in the atmosphere.
But then, Jenna, do we actually have a problem, or we have a system that we are going through until infinity? Do we have a problem? Would you say climate change is a problem?
Yes, there is a problem. Remember, we said we're talking about a balance of nature, right? But now, if you look at the carbon dioxide that she was talking about, the rate at which we are now emitting, which is the human interference by the factories, you see the carbon dioxide that is now being emitted into the atmosphere. The rate at which it is being produced is now not the same as the rate at which oxygen is also produced from the plants.
Isn't it? There's an opinion on this bench that, oh, never mind, Mother Nature will sort itself out. Are we not saying that?
Yeah.
When we say Mother Nature will sort itself out, I think I'm not really saying we ought to be responsible because Mother Nature will take care of itself. Because I think there are some things that I've alluded to when we speak about these things, when particularly like our traditional societies, how they looked at preserving the environment. They had this concept of understanding the environment that even the present generation doesn't have. I normally discuss this with Soko, that when I was growing up in the rural areas, if I pick up an axe to cut a tree, my grandfather will scold me very heavily to say, what's the reason you want to cut down that tree? And he gave me the only reason you're gonna cut down a tree, it's dry and you want to use it as firewood, it's a dead wood already. Or you want to build a house, you want to build a crow, that's the only time you can get an axe to cut a tree. But apart from that, you cannot aimlessly just cut trees. But we need to get that balance. That balance is no longer there. We have brought up a generation that doesn't understand that balance between nature and our survival as humans. So as a result, now you go to the rural areas, all the trees have been cut down. I'm not advocating for that responsibility, although I believe that if we harm Mother Nature, she will take vengeance on us. And we are already seeing the results by economic migrations where we have encroaching desertification, resulting in economic crises, and people are moving across the world because of climate change.
Well said. Well said. I got to understand quite a number of issues you have raised here, but I am getting the impression that it's entirely the interaction of us as human beings versus the environment that is creating more problems on the climate change phenomena. So are we saying this world could have been a better one environmentally if we take off human beings?
No, we can't bluntly say that and agree on that, because the human being, although he has got some contribution that are negative, he also has got some contributions that are positive. So it's a matter of balancing the two to see which how can we maintain that status quo that is at equilibrium. And it's only the human being who has got the capacity to control. You can't leave the cows and oxen and donkeys to control.
Atanda tena. Panato is totally.
Thank you so much, Jenna. Oh, you want to say something, Misha?
Yeah, there's a comment from someone on the WhatsApp who is watching us.
Mm-hmm.
The question is, will the rate of deterioration of Mother Earth be at par with the rate of replenishing itself?
Good question.
A yes or no answer there, but we are saying the rate at which we destroy, for us to then feel these effects, should be more than the rate at which we are replenishing, because we are already feeling effects, temperature changes, sea rises, we are seeing droughts, we are seeing. So what this means is then to say the rate at which we are destroying is not equal to the rate at which we are replenishing. Because if the two variables were equal, we should not be facing any problem currently. What do you think?
The reason being that there are now too many justifications. Remember what Shumba had just said. To cut a tree, his uncle or his old man would scold him. But because he would ask what is the reason. But now with these technological changes, there are now too many reasons. You need to build a house, you need to build a dam, you need to make a desk, you need so many reasons.
You need medicine to bewitch someone, etc.
Yes.
and even with the cash crop of tobacco, some in developing countries.
Babata Chiroda.
Okay, look. In this case, I'm talking about what we do or what is happening around us.
What we
Yes.
do?
Yes, what we do, yes, of course, in tobacco production, we use the firewood, we use coal, cure the tobacco. But we are also moving very fast in replanting the faster growing trees like the eucalyptus. So we're always moving forward. And also there's a lot of changes that the industry backed on. For instance, on the seedbed production, instead of using the other chemicals that were actually very destroying the ozone layer, we're now using something which is mild and use of the float trays. So all those things are being done to try to come back to the control of the balance.
I agree with you in total. I remember I was part of a campaign which we carried mainly in Mashonaland East on the need to embrace environmental friendly projects for tobacco farmers. The eucalyptus you are talking about, yes, would be encouraged to be grown on any farm. And farmers would be asked to have their plantations. They'll be provided with the seeds and everything so that this would then reduce the cutting down of trees or the some deforestation of wood as a natural source of energy. Yes, the core issue was also being encouraged. And I remember discussing with Mija to say what is being done in other countries that produce tobacco to reduce the effects of deforestation or deforestation itself. And we were saying in some cases, people use electricity, and we were then saying with Zimbabwe, it's unfortunate that we don't have that kind of supply of electricity to feed into the farming ecosystem. So yeah, sure, for tobacco, I will agree with you that a lot is being done on the ground to try and reduce the effects of deforestation as a factor, a very, very important factor in climate change.
That's a comment from Sydney on Facebook.
I've also noticed a few projects that I've seen, documentaries of projects that people are learning how to turn deserts into oases.
Yeah, I think you have sent a video that illustrates that.
Okay. Can I respond to that one? Climate change is mainly affected by industrialization and population growth, is not it. Yes, very true. The impact of industrialization cannot be underrated. And the impact of population growth can also not be underrated, because it's population growth that in fact increases also industrialization. But to that, there are a number of other factors which squarely fit into what the person has observed there. For example, when we are talking of generation of power, it can still be classified as industrialization. If we are talking of manufacturing industries emitting a lot of gases, it still falls under industrialization. But if we are talking of cutting down trees, which people do and which is mainly done in the rural areas, you find that it may not have anything to do with industrialization. So deforestation can have or cannot have something to do with industrialization. You can also look at things like transportation, the buses, the cars, and all emitting those gases. Yeah. It then speaks to what the observer is saying there. It speaks to what the observer is saying there. Mainly, yes, could be the right word, but not only industrialization.
Dr. Matiza,
Yes.
please, can I interject there? You know,
Yes.
I'm one person who fully represents the rural people. Now, if you
Yes.
come to me and tell me that when you're talking about deforestation and you point all the 6 fingers of your arm to say the
Yeah.
rural areas, I don't believe in that. Also,
Okay.
the growth in the urbanization, all those locations where they're being built, they're cutting trees so that they can build those houses, build those factories. So you can't look at us and say, no, we just put in firewood, little small things. Yeah, so don't blame us.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. It's unfortunate that the observation got right up your veins, and because and that forces you to be naturally defensive as a man. To
Yes.
say, yeah, to say,
No, I wanted to support him. I wanted to support.
Naturally, as a man, you're being defensive. I look at that way.
No, I wanted to support.
Yeah,
wanted to support
ngati Shumba time.
Yeah, I wanted to support Jane on that point. That I think we are overemphasizing, pointing a finger at the rural folk. I think the issue is actually about institutions and planning. Because I always say this all the time, it's all about planning and institutions. So when you haven't got any idea of way you manage these things, I think that's where the problems are coming, that our solutions to the climate change, to me, are the problem, not really climate change itself. Because when we look at the way we are building, let's take, for instance, Zimbabwe. Why are we emphasizing just building going out? Why have we not started to adopt building going up?
I think
So as a result, this building going out, we're always looking for land to cut down trees and to grow new suburbs. Yet,
That kind of Shumba,
we can start to build vertically going up, so that we can accommodate the growing populations in flats, in apartments, so that we put less stress on land.
Shumba, that kind of a campaign will be very controversial. We have architects with schools of thought relating to why we should have vertical or upward progression in terms of their buildings. It's not as straightforward as you were putting it, that, look, why don't we do that? We need some educational workshops on the pros and cons, so that people have some understanding as regards why we need to build upwards or vertically or wherever. I can't say we don't have that knowledge as such. We are not convinced enough to follow that track of education.
Yeah, this is where I'm saying institutions now come in. Institutions and planning
historically don't do that.
Yeah,
you know that.
institutions and planning, that's where it's paramount. So that's where the solutions are, because you need the research institutes who are looking into these things. You need think tanks who are looking into these things to say, how do we sustain, how can we build sustainably in line with those climate change in order to sort of to address these concerns about climate change. Because if we just say we will continue as usual, this is where I'm saying, of course, Mother Earth will do what it needs to do, but institutions and planning is paramount for us to solve these problems.
That's
a genuine view. That's a genuine view, which, however, Shumba, would be very difficult to implement for as long as we have the land there. There's one geographer, Esther Boserap, who was saying this with reference to Japan after the Hiroshima and Nagasaki attacks from the Allied powers in 1945. So when Japan was destroyed, they needed to reconstruct. And quite a number of theories fly there to say the people who destroyed Japan were the same people who wanted to rebuild it. So according to Esther Boserap, because there was no land in Japan, Japan being made up of just 3 small islands running one after the other, they had to bring about this idea of skyscraping as a reaction to necessity, to then say necessity was the mother of invention in their case. So because in areas like Zimbabwe, we have plenty of land, unlike what it is like in the UK there or in Australia there is always a temptation to want to expand outwards instead of upwards. But my honest view would then be to say, because we now know of the effects of climate change, and we are actually feeling the effects ourselves as human beings, despite that Jenna is cutting a lot of trees there in Gota Hills. we are saying, where's Jenna?
Yes, disappeared.
For some reason, Jenna dropped off, and I'm not able to bring him back. He's in the back room, but I can't bring him up. I don't know why.
Now Jenna is cutting a lot of trees there at Gota Hills. We are basically saying, yes, the cutting of trees may not entirely stop, but cannot we then educate ourselves, educate these generations coming after us, the impact of just cutting without replacing? I tell you, one day I drove to Beatrice. I was in Zimbabwe, and I wanted to park my car under a tree. The security guard there told me to park where there was no tree, and I was arguing with him to say, hey, my friend, I can't park my car there. And he asked me this question: how many trees have you planted, say, so far this year? you want to park your car under a tree. How many have you planted yourself this year? And I had no answer to that one. I looked at him and thought, this guy is stubborn. But I realized he was telling me the truth. So basically what we may need to do, now that we are feeling the effects, we are seeing them, we are with the effects everywhere. Why can't we make it a point that we then try to replenish Mother Earth at a faster rate than we are destroying it? I don't know. What do you think? That speaks to that question.
I think the issue sometimes is there are things that Mother Earth has bestowed upon us.
Mm-hmm.
How much coal have we got in Zimbabwe, for instance?
Mm-hmm.
In as much, this is where I'm saying planning comes in and institutions come in. Because sometimes we swallow the narrative that we are given to say, do this, do this. We are not thinking on our own, right? So we have got abundant coal in Zimbabwe. If that can be driven to farmers, that can be supplied to farmers to cure tobacco. This is already something provided by nature we can use to mitigate climate change. But now coal has also become a dirty word. This is where the problem starts. And once you say coal is a dirty word, then you are leaving people with no option but to go for those trees.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Guys,
So I think go on,
okay.
James.
Okay. What was because the answer has been on my case. Okay.
Akuvalira pasi.
Okay. At least the person in Beatrice who gave you a rude awakening. The trees are being planted in these rural areas, in the farms. That's why we are planting trees. But people in the cities there, they are busy saying they are doing expansion work. They are not doing like what Shumba is saying is the planning thing. You want to build a factory at this point, you need to put flats there. No one is building any tree there. Is planting any tree. But now you come back and then you say the people here. And then the next point that I want to talk to Doctor was, I'm not impressed by the issue of saying Zimbabwe has got plenty of land. Yes, you are comparing with Japan. Japan has got their own things there. Because look at now what is happening. Chinese are coming because of these reckless statements of saying there's a lot of land in Zimbabwe. It's okay for us, this land of ours. It's ours. It's okay. We are justified with our land and we are using it.
Jenna, my view is that the Chinese are not just coming, they are being invited. What do you think?
No, they're just coming. That's the polite version of it.
Politics, let's go back to the climate.
For a long time, I lived in Mkare. There was a company called Water Company.
Yeah,
that was a company. Water Company land, loads of land where they planted their trees, like in rows. And they had different age trees that are ready to harvest, trees that are different age, and they had rows and rows. If you went to Water Company farm, there were rows and rows of trees. Because they were always planting. Every year they were planting. When the one field is cut, there's already baby trees being planted, and another field is ready for cutting, and another, so it was like a cycle going on. And I think it's even in small doses, even if we educate each other per family or per community.
But where it's going is Soko. We need to use
there's a project in Kenya there's a project in Kenya where if you buy something, you get a little pocket of seeds that you are encouraged to just throw out of even the window of your car. Stop and throw them, and they will grow. And I saw on telly one guy who went to the Amazon and he ate tomatoes. And he said, when I go there and I relieve myself, those tomatoes will grow. Things like that. Seeds do go far.
I will tell you some experience that I had sometime, and it's up to you to evaluate whether it's necessary to this discussion or not. In 2008, I was doing diploma applied a diploma in applied project monitoring and evaluation with TDI, an institution that was training on that. Then I come from Nyanga myself. And in Nyanga, we have a lot of land that is under wattle trees and cypress trees for Mutare border timbers, the company that you were talking about, Soko.
Yeah.
So they have made it a point that they've grown wattle trees and cypress trees in all the mountains that surround the area of Nyanga.
Right.
So at one point, they wanted to increase the acreage under wattle trees. And in the process of trying to increase the acreage, they cleared so much land of indigenous trees that used to exist there. And then they put in the new seeds for the wattle trees and the cypress trees. What they didn't realize was by destroying the indigenous trees, they had removed so much food for the zooplankton ecosystem in the area. The baboons feeding on majanji, hachka, and all that found themselves with nothing to eat. Yeah. And what then followed was a situation where the baboons began to eat the wattle trees. They would pluck off the top part of the wattle tree and eat on that one, which was fresh. And the Mutare border timbers reacted by spraying those wattle trees. And baboons died in their
Killing the
houses.
baboons.
Killing the baboons. And there was the source of conflict. I had to be sent there because I am from that area to try and resolve that conflict, because the international community could no longer buy Mutare border timber because they called it blood timber.
Just
You're
like
right.
They
we
stopped
have,
buying from Mutare border timbers. You see?
but
So we had to go there to solve that conflict. It was really a serious conflict that you cannot imagine. The local chiefs were saying, Mauraya vanamkanya, vedu isisu, ihama dzedu. The local environmental guys, the police, the community versus Mutare border timbers, and they needed arbitration from people like ourselves. So I remember I was brought in to try and solve that issue. That level of environmental degradation, preference of the commercial trees over the indigenous trees. In the process, destroying the food chain for the local animals. Vanamkanya wai nguruwe dzemsango and everything. Nyaya yakazopera vakutori machibage pakati pemalaini emawatiro kuti vanamukanya vachi.
Right.
And that all hinges on what Shumba was just saying. To say
Yes.
the planning is the biggest predator in all these stories.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly.
Because I want to divert from myself, because you are everything. You are now pointing saying the farmer is the story. Right. There are also some other issues, such as the volcanic eruptions, the mining, and all those things. Of course, that's
that's
not
a
me.
disaster waiting to happen there.
But it's also helping in the changing the economic. The environmental change, causing that environmental change, climate change.
But many people want to understand that. Because left, right, and center, you go to Mazoe, a lot of people are complaining
Yeah, you are very right, Makombe. We haven't even touched mining. How much mining is affecting, is not being considered in this whole equation.
Yeah.
We have had this ever since we went into indigenization of mining. I tell you, the way we have gone with Makorokoza mining gold, I don't know whether anyone is being accountable for the environmental degradation they are doing.
Or if they're getting the gold for that matter.
Because I think everywhere there are holes of people looking for gold.
Yeah.
Yet you needed, this is why my emphasis is always on institutions. We need to learn best practices from other countries. I was in Australia. People are allowed to do what we are doing in Zimbabwe, Makorokoza, going to look for gold. But you've got specific areas you are directed to. And there are certain rules that you are supposed to follow. If you dig for gold, after you finish, you need to fill up those holes. Those are the strength of the institutions, and you can be fined if you don't follow those rules. But it seems we have just opened the door for all, and without any sort of guidelines to say this is what you're supposed to do. We give you a claim. When you finish your mining your claim, or even if you don't find anything, you need to supposed to close that hole. And probably you could add on to say plant trees after you've finished doing that.
Shumba, I can tell you that all those things are there, the rules, regulations. It's only the part of the implementation, but
No,
all
it's not
those things
about
are there.
implementation.
If you look at
There's
Emma,
no policy.
we also have got Emma. Emma inopapa fine ekuti unotanga tengesa musha wese kuti uonekwa une demo.
There is no policy.
Politics.
There is no policy whatsoever.
Let's also give the viewers an opportunity to interact with us. Those who are watching at either on Facebook or on YouTube, you can put your comment in the chat box, or you can WhatsApp to that number so that we can also take into account your views. And I know we have only touched what is climate change and to some extent what causes it, and we haven't dealt much in terms of what can we do to alleviate it. And I think one other thing is, we know there's this COP 27, COP 29, and the COP whatever COP it is going to be. Is it only discussed at global level? How do we localize so that someone in Binga in Zimbabwe will also join the conversation?
Yeah, this is where I have a problem with these global agreements, because they are pushed by some powers. This is where I say reverse colonialism also comes in if you are not very careful. Yeah, no, we have to say it. We have to say it. So what's happening with these agreements? I think we have a tendency of, we are quick to sign to things that are not really applicable within our own local environment. We are letting other people determine our own way or our trajectory in terms of economic building, so they come and impose, this is COP28, this is what we're going to do in terms of COP28. But does that go hand in hand with growing the economy of Zimbabwe? You need to bring those things on a local level before you sign them. Right now, if you take instance for China is leading that global climatic change. But who has been building the most coal-fired power plants in the world? China is almost building one every week or two every week in China.
The problem is we do not have ground rules relating to what you're saying. Yes, institutions. I do agree. But we don't have enough voice power to that effect. Look at establishments like TED and so on and so on. They facilitate avenues where their story is told in line with their own perception. And we don't do that. We all subscribe to them because they have to tell the story in a particular manner. See what I mean? We need to start thinking about creating user-friendly media to our own benefit, where we can tell our story the way we want. That's why I've created Lecture the World. This gives everybody an opportunity to come and tell us their story wherever you are in the world and how you feel it from your own perspective.
Umba, is that you saying that?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah. Why?
Are you
Yes.
sure? It's
Yeah,
you saying
sure.
that?
Yeah.
Because I hear your complaints when you say you want to open ZBC, ZTV. Because we tell the people what we want to be done. And then you say, no, they mustn't just be talking about the same thing over and over, hammering this into people's minds. That's the same thing, that's the approach that we must have, which you are actually prescribing, which is
Right.
good.
What I'm prescribing is a non-judgmental approach, unconditional positive regard platform, where everybody has got an opportunity to give a positive narrative to the world. I'm inviting you, Jenna, to lecture the world on anything. This is your chance, and if you don't grab it,
But you see now, those people you just said they tell the people or they sell in the media what they want the people to hear or
their
what you
own
want them to.
narrative. I am
Their own
inviting you
narrative,
to
yes,
facilitate
yes.
your own
Of which
narrative.
we also trying to do that as well, because we must give our own narrative. Like for instance, the first one that I was just been saying, that don't keep on saying there's plenty of land which is useless or underutilized, or I don't know which other derogatory terms you want to use. I don't subscribe to that.
No, land is a finite resource.
You may not
cannot
subscribe
keep
to
on.
that. That's fine. But then there are certain aspects we have got to take on both through the bullet. Institutions. That's been spoken of over and over again. We need to look into that. We need to look into why they are talking about that. We need to have think tanks to give a talk on that. If we don't talk about that kind of media out there, then it's finished. We are dead. You look at TED. Just look at the way TED is developed. Yeah. So all I'm simply saying is, I mean, it's high time we start having people like you, the likes of Shumba, the likes of everybody, to come and facilitate their own talk relating to what we're talking about. It's not about ZBC or anything like that. Fair enough. We can invite you to talk about ZBC as well if you want. But what we're saying for now, we need people to give a positive narrative relating to whatever topic we have.
Right. There's a comment from Sydney there. I think he's commenting about mining and land clearance for open cast. And his comment is land clearance in Orowa Panet for open cast. I don't think an average family of 6 can deforest up to that level, even for the period of 20 years.
Yeah, very true.
No, he's supporting me. He's saying you are pointing the wrong people.
Christ, he's supporting you.
Yes, you are pointing at the wrong people on this deforestation. Deforestation is being done at large by these corporates and those people that are in the cities, emanating from the what Shumba was saying, the policies and the plannings.
Yeah,
That's why you're talking about 6 families.
You could be right. You could be right, Ipopo. You could be right. Both of us have use those places were littered with forests. Now out on Makomo, here and there, which means all the trees were gunned down.
And also the other issue about the first world classes, countries there. those cars that, because of the carbon emission from the exhaust pipes, you find at times those cars that you do not want anymore in your countries, then you send them here as if we've got a different.
Come and talk about it and facilitate a narrative.
Jenna, I think we spoke
Yes.
about this before. Tichitaura nyaya used clothing. I worked in the government. Kwaive my anti-dumping duties. Mota dzimwe dzinopinda muZimbabwe dziya, they would not get in. They would not get in. Pepa anti izvozvi government yakazotanga kuti mota dzinokwanisa kupinda ndedzemakore akati. Mutemo iyoyo yakagara iriko ainzi ma-anti-dumping duties. And the previous institutions, whether we like it or not, you or not Anna Smith there, they used to really enforce those laws. So nothing of that nature would come into the country. But we turn a blind eye on those things, and they've got a harm to our environment, to our health, and everything else.
But listen to what I'm saying, Shumba. I'm saying, yes, we say because we're poor, we might want those cars. But the best, you should also know that we are talking about the global village.
We are not even saying that.
Listen, Mr. Makombe, we are talking about the global village, and we are talking about the this ozone layer covering the whole earth. So if you remove one car from South Africa which is smoking, and then sending it to Zimbabwe to smoke in Zimbabwe, you're doing nothing. So those countries must actually stop shipping those things here and destroy them there.
Mr. Jenna, look here. We are saying, okay, this story is not well disseminated. We need to sit down and correctly, facilitate this story at a very large scale. If we don't do that, nothing will change. So far, you're refusing to come and tell us the whole story.
In this country, they wanted a concert a few years back to make people aware of global impact, global climate change impact. And all these stars flew in their private jets to come and tell us and sing about it. And I thought...
I remember that weekend there was a big strike and there were
because they came to say, if you turn off your lights, you are saving the planet. And people were saying, but you flew in to tell us that. You could have sent a message. I mean, you could have called us. It sometimes
you're a victim of our own making.
Yes. Because sometimes the small things we do don't make sense. If we are crying about global change and we are flying in, each one on their own private jet.
It's like the growth.
I think this is what Sydney is talking about in his comment to say most of these solutions that we are given, they are from the top to the bottom. We are always made to suck these solutions.
But we are saying you must be in a position to
exactly. Where I disagree with Jenna is poverty is a mindset. And that mindset, if you destroy institutions, yes, you're gonna struggle with poverty. Because for them, one thing you must say, those anti-dumping duties, what they are trying to prevent is when these cars are here, they struggle to find where to throw them away, right? So they are looking for a dumping ground for them. So they will say, oh, we have got old fridges, we have got old computers, we have got old cars. We can ship all this lot to Africa so that they preserve their environment. They haven't got, they don't cut trees in order to create dumping sites. But they ship all that rubbish to Africa. So this is where institutions come in now to say, do you have robust enough institutions to stop that kind of dumping in your economy? Because that dumping also affects jobs, it affects your economy, it affects everything. You know?
You are right there, but my point was to say, okay, he's right, but there's a word "but" was my "but" is there. Okay, what I'm saying is, let's share the blame. That is not good that they are doing. Yes,
Wrong
we
is
have got
wrong no
our
matter who
policies.
does it.
We have got our policies which we are not following. We are accepting the things that are being dumped, right? Which is wrong. We don't have to accept that. But what I'm also saying is, the people you should also be responsible by not sending those things to
Oh
dump
my
here.
God. Jenna.
Mm.
Those are interests. You know, when we talk of Western interest, they don't care.
Ona zviri kuita Trump nematariff.
Yeah,
It
they
doesn't
don't
even
care
talk.
as long as, because look, let's take an instance for used clothing. It's a headache to where to put most of these used clothing in the West world, because clothing is so cheap. People go out on a Friday night, the dress he wear for that night, they don't want it anymore in their life. So they saw mountains and mountains of used clothing. To them is actually a headache. So if they can find somewhere to send it or dump it, don't think they will wake up and say, no, we're not sending this to Africa. I think there are countries that have actually been threatened for trying to stop the importation of used clothing. Because
So
if they
how do
don't...
we? Okay, then how are we going to try to control this environment or this climate change?
This is
If we are
what we
just
are
moving,
saying.
if we are moving something from one country to the other, that causes the same effect.
This is what we are saying. It's a top-bottom approach, which I think to me is based on superiority or power, whereby they say open up your economies, we dump these things onto you. But the reverse cannot be done, to say our rubbish from Africa can have access to the West. It's always maybe their expired food, their used clothing, their used cars, used whatever has got a red market or a dumping ground in Africa. But if we had those robust institutions that say, no, we cannot accept this kind of standards, we need to build our own industries here, but that they don't afford you, because these things are being agreed on a global state. Zimbabwe goes to the COP28, it signs, right? For you to turn around tomorrow to say, no, we don't want to do this, it won't work. They'll say you already signed here that you're going to do this.
Right. Let's begin to wind up and give our closing remarks. Jenna, we'll come back to this topic, but I think, as Umbai has said, it might be on a platform where we will be inviting individuals to air their views.
All right.
And the lecture what you think should be done. I think we go on a round, but I think there are some key strategic questions we may want to just respond to in our closing remarks. I know, Jenna, people cannot see you, but you are there in the background. Unfortunately, I'm not sure why the system is not allowing me to bring you back into the studio.
Who can't see me? But it looks like from here I'm on. Everyone can see me.
It's been here
Oh,
for
but
ages.
I can't see you.
Oh, we
No,
can
but
see
the whole time I'm here.
We can see him.
Even when you're talking about me in the background.
I can see him in the background, but I can't see him on my screen.
No,
Oh,
he's
but I am
he's
fully
on our
on there.
screen.
All right. Right. So let's try to answer these questions in our closing remarks. How can this discussion come to the local person in Cholocho. And what strategies can a smallholder farmer implement today to offset climate change? And what role should the wealthier nation be towards this climate change? And when we are within nations, what can cities do to offset climate change? Because the imbalances of our contribution to the climate. And whoever is going to give a final remark, can they give us one or two things that each one of us can start to do today to offset climate change?
Okay, I'll start from the Cholocho person, who is me.
Okay.
There's a gap that we left. We should have actually started by explaining to say when we talk about the what is in
abuda uyo unzai mumwe
akanga akutaura chete anobva
then how it affects our living. So that we can now explain to them to say, okay, now the trees produces the oxygen that must be kept at a certain amount in the atmosphere, and then some other gases. That oxygen is what we need to breathe in, and then out that carbon dioxide. But that carbon dioxide is also coming in from the emissions of the gases, emission of the when you're burning your trees, you see, so that we
ndozvaanoita kana akutaurisa.
right.
now I'm almost giving up now. Okay, so we can say now we've agreed that we must keep on planting trees. They are very beneficial to our long life. We don't have to just cut the trees down. We also have got to practice our agriculture correctly, keeping of the now going back to my work now, contours, so that we don't get the place being desertified or becoming desertification coming in, right? So those are the basics that we can do it. And then also on the mining, it's also affecting us now because we also have got the Makorokoza. So you must also talk about replenishing when you dig close back and keep the place practice safe agriculture also on there. Right. Okay.
All right. Who goes next?
I'll go. I agree with Jenna what you just said. We need to not really educate each other, remind each other that what if everybody does a little bit, it will count. So even if you growing whatever you're growing in your field, if you edge your field with trees, grow those trees, it will help. So if everybody plants one tree today, it will help.
Okay. Shumba or Umba?
Shumba ite muizesa.
Yeah, so for me, I would say, I think it's high time we strengthen our institutions and our planning to say what exactly, how are we marching forward in terms of our industrialization, mining, housing, infrastructure, in line with the climatic change. I actually hate the top-down approach. I would rather like the bottom from the bottom approach going up, where the locals are setting the agenda for climatic change, because our societies know we are robbing them of the knowledge that they have in preserving their communities. Instead, we are being preached to the solutions that we need, when we can actually come with our own local solutions that mitigate these climatic problems. So I think that's what I would favor. And then I would also appeal to the policymakers that they really need to put these things into force, because some of these laws, we've got them on statute books, but they are not being enforced. So this is where we end up with all these problems that we have. I think to conclude, I would say we really need to use local solutions. We have things that can mitigate climatic change. Like I gave an example, we have got abundant coal in Zimbabwe. The idea that someone can preach us not to use coal, yet like one of the viewers suggested, what you find is the Western world is developed on these fossil fuels, but they are sort of saying, no, you cannot do. We need local solutions to say Zimbabwe is abundant in coal. We use that coal, whether it's for tobacco, for mining, and a lot of other worse things. We have got local solutions. We don't need someone preaching to us, use solar, use this. Yes, we can complement some of these things with solar, but first of all, we need to consider what nature has bestowed upon us as Zimbabweans, or in Africa per se, in most of the African countries we have.
Thank you very much, Umba.
I always want to keep it short and sweet. We need to understand the notion of climate change is real. Climate change is real. We should be in a position to start facilitating correctional platforms via the bottom-up approach to ensure we get on top of things. We need to harness policymakers into this debate, and we must have a multicultural approach to it. We need to have a multicultural perspective in terms of defining different narratives relating to climate change. The core thing is bottom-up approach. Thank you.
And thank you very much. To our viewers, we have heard it from this powerful panel. It was a very enlightening conversation on your favorite channel, Champions Network TV. And to our panelists, we can't thank you enough for sharing your wisdom, your passion, your commitment to climate change, and sparing your time from your busy schedule to come on this platform to share your views. And to our viewers, thank you for tuning in, and those who engaged with us, thank you for your comments. They enriched our dialogue. As we close, I would like to leave you with some takeaways from our panelists and the lessons to carry on and to continue thinking about. Our first came from Jenna, who was giving what someone from a rural place, it might be in Toronto, it might be in a rural in a Botswana or whichever rural setting. But he emphasized the importance of teaching our locals the importance of climate change so that they can take responsibility. And for those who might be involved in mining, we have the habit of taking correctional activity afterwards when you mine close up after the mining. Shumba Soko just to emphasize that she agrees with Jenna that planting trees is important. Shumba hammers on the importance of strengthening institutions and the bottom up approach, not the top bottom, where the agenda is set at a local level and our policymakers to use what has already been in the statute books because they are there but not implemented. A view that has been echoed also by Mbama Kombe, who says climate change is a real thing, it's there, it's here with us. And we need now to facilitate platforms that can begin to come up with corrective measures using the bottom up approach as Shumba has articulated and using also multicultural approach because we might view it from different approaches depending what we believe in. But at the end of it all, it's a bottom up approach that works. I think that has been threading through all our contributions. So let's not leave this conversation here. Let's carry it into our classrooms, our farms, our boardrooms, and our parliament, because the climate crisis is not someone else's problem. It's all of us. And together, we can make a difference. Thank you for joining Champion Network TV, and I am your host, Mija. Stay informed, stay inspired, and stay active. With this, good night.